You don't belong here. Economy is in the back." Those were the words that sealed flight attendant Tiffany's fate, though she didn't know it yet. She stood guarding the first-class cabin like a palace gatekeeper, sneering at the quiet, simply dressed black woman holding a ticket for seat 1A. Tiffany thought she was just doing her job, keeping the riff-raff out of her elite cabin. She thought she had all the power at 30,000 feet. But she never stopped to ask who this woman actually was. By the time the captain stepped out of the cockpit and his face went pale, it was already too late. What happened on Flight 382 wasn't just a mistake. It was a reckoning, and it cost someone everything. The recycled air of John F. Kennedy International Airport always smelled the same, a mix of stale coffee floor wax and high-octane anxiety. But for Tiffany Miller, the lead flight attendant on transatlantic flight 382 to London, it smelled like authority. Tiffany adjusted her silk scarf in the reflection of the boarding gate window. At 34, she was immaculate. Not a hair was out of place in her tight blonde bun. Her red lipstick was applied with surgical precision, and her navy blue uniform was tailored to within an inch of its life. She didn't just wear the uniform. She weaponized it. She had been flying for 12 years, and in that time she had cultivated a reputation. To the pilots, she was efficient. To the junior crew, she was a terror. And to the passengers of first class, she was a smiling servant, provided they looked the part. "Boarding first class and Diamond Medallion members only," the gate agent announced over the PA system. Tiffany took her position at the aircraft door, her heels clicking sharply against the metal threshold. She pasted on her signature smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. She loved this part. The parade of suits, expensive watches, and designer luggage. These were her people, or at least the people she wished she was. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson," she purred as a man in a charcoal Armani suit breezed past, barely acknowledging her. She didn't mind the snub. Money didn't have to be polite. "Good morning, Mrs. Vanderbilt. Lovely bag," she complimented a woman carrying a Birkin that cost more than Tiffany's car. Then the flow of cashmere and leather stopped, and a shadow fell over Tiffany's entryway. Standing there was a woman who looked like she had taken a wrong turn on her way to the bus station. She was an older black woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with greying hair pulled back into a sensible, no-nonsense ponytail. She wore a faded grey cardigan that had seen better days, loose-fitting slacks that bunched at the ankles and sneakers that looked like they were bought at a discount store 5 years ago. She carried no designer roller bag, just a worn canvas tote bag clutched tightly to her chest. Tiffany's smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sharp, practiced condescension. She stepped slightly to the right, physically blocking the aisle that led to the first-class cabin. "Excuse me, ma'am," Tiffany said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all its warmth. "Boarding is currently for first class and Diamond members only. General boarding for economy groups 4 through 9 starts in 20 minutes. The woman looked up. Her eyes were warm, framed by deep laugh lines, but there was a steeliness behind them that Tiffany missed completely. "I know," the woman said softly. Her voice was calm, melodic even. "I'm on this flight." She tried to step around Tiffany, but the flight attendant didn't budge. Tiffany crossed her arms, the universal sign of "you shall not pass." "I don't think you heard me," Tiffany said, speaking slower now as if addressing a child. "This is the priority line. The line for economy is back there by the Hudson newsstand. You need to wait your turn like everyone else." Behind the woman, a businessman in a hurry checked his Rolex and sighed loudly. "What's the hold-up?" he grumbled. "Just a moment, sir," Tiffany called out over the woman's shoulder, flashing an apologetic smile to the man. "We have a passenger who seems to be confused about her seating assignment. She turned her gaze back to the woman in the grey cardigan, her eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, you are blocking the flow of premium passengers. I need you to step aside." The woman whose name was Evelyn Carter didn't step aside. She didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look confused. She simply reached into her canvas tote and pulled out a boarding pass. "I'm not confused, dear," Evelyn said. She held the pass out. Tiffany snatched it from her hand, ready to point out the seat number, probably 34B or 42E, and send her on a walk of shame back to the terminal. She scanned the ticket, her lips curled in anticipation of the correction. Flight 382, JFK to LHR, passenger Carter Evelyn, seat 1A. Tiffany blinked. She looked at the ticket, then at Evelyn, then back at the ticket. Seat 1A. The most coveted seat on the plane. The bulkhead window. Total privacy. For a second, Tiffany's brain short-circuited. It didn't make sense. Seat 1A cost upwards of $12,000 for this leg. This woman looked like she clipped coupons for canned soup. "This," Tiffany stammered for a fraction of a second before her prejudice rebuilt its defenses. "Where did you get this?" Evelyn tilted her head. "I printed it at the kiosk. Is there a problem?" "There is a problem," Tiffany snapped. She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "Look, I don't know if you found this on the floor or if their system made a mistake, but we both know you aren't sitting in first class." The businessman behind Evelyn groaned. "Come on. I have a meeting in London." The pressure was mounting. Tiffany felt the heat rising in her neck. She couldn't let this woman sit in 1A. It would ruin the aesthetic of the cabin. It would upset them all. The real clients. Captain Sterling was a stickler for cabin atmosphere. He hated anything that disrupted the premium experience. "Ma'am, stand to the side," Tiffany ordered, pointing to the wall of the jet bridge. "I need to verify this. I suspect this is a duplicate or a fraudulent ticket." "It's not fraudulent," Evelyn said, her voice hardening just a fraction. "And I will not stand to the side. I paid for my seat, and I would like to board." "You paid?" Tiffany let out a short, incredulous laugh. "With what, ma'am, please? Don't make a scene. Just go to your actual seat in the back, and I won't call security. If you try to sneak into first class, that's theft of services. That's a federal offense." Evelyn stared at her. The air between them seemed to vibrate with tension. "Young lady," Evelyn said, "you are making a very big mistake." "The only mistake," Tiffany hissed, leaning in close so only Evelyn could hear, "is you thinking you can walk onto my plane looking like the cleaning crew and expect champagne service. Now move." Suddenly the voice of the junior flight attendant, a sweet girl named Sarah, piped up from the galley behind Tiffany. "Tiffany, is everything okay? Captain Sterling is asking why boarding has stopped." Tiffany didn't look back. "We have a security issue, Sarah. A passenger is refusing to follow instructions and attempting to access a restricted cabin." Evelyn took a deep breath. She adjusted her grip on her canvas tote. "I'm going to my seat now," she stated. Evelyn moved forward. It wasn't aggressive, just inevitable. She stepped around Tiffany with a grace that belied her age. Tiffany gasped. The audacity. She spun around, grabbing Evelyn's arm, a major violation of protocol. But Tiffany was seeing red. "Do not walk away from me," Tiffany shouted. The sound echoed down the jet bridge. The cabin went silent. The businessman behind them stopped checking his watch. Sarah, the junior attendant, covered her mouth. Evelyn stopped. She looked down at Tiffany's hand on the sleeve of her cheap grey cardigan. Then she looked up into Tiffany's eyes. The warmth was gone from Evelyn's face. In its place was something cold and ancient. "Take your hand off me," Evelyn said. It wasn't a request. Tiffany, realizing she had crossed a physical line, yanked her hand back as if burned. But she couldn't back down now. Her ego wouldn't let her. She had to win. "Fine," Tiffany said, smoothing her uniform. Her face flushed. "Go sit down. But don't get comfortable. Before we take off, I'm going to run that ticket through the main system. And when it comes back flagged, and it will, I'm going to personally escort you off this plane in handcuffs." Evelyn didn't respond to the threat. She simply turned and walked into the first-class cabin. She walked past the pods of the wealthy elite, who looked up from their iPads and champagne flutes with curiosity. She found seat 1A, a spacious suite with a lie-flat bed. She placed her worn canvas tote on the Italian leather ottoman. She sat down. Tiffany stormed into the galley, her hands shaking with rage. She grabbed the interphone to call the cockpit, but then stopped. No. She wouldn't bother Captain Sterling yet. He was busy with pre-flight checks. She would handle this herself. She would wait until the doors were closed, verify the fraud, and then have the satisfaction of humiliating this woman in front of everyone right before taxi. "Sarah!" Tiffany barked at the junior attendant. "Keep an eye on 1A. Don't serve her anything, not even water. She's not staying." Sarah looked nervous. "But Tiffany, her ticket, it scanned green. The reader said 1A. "Machines break, Sarah," Tiffany snapped aggressively, opening a bottle of Dom Perignon for the businessman who had just boarded. "Use your eyes. Does she look like a 1A to you?" "She's a scammer. Probably used stolen miles or a hacked app. I see it all the time." Sarah bit her lip, but didn't argue. Tiffany was the lead. You didn't argue with Tiffany if you wanted to keep your schedule. Back in 1A, Evelyn Carter settled into the seat. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the commotion in the galley. She could hear every word Tiffany said. Evelyn reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. She opened it to a fresh page. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked focused. She pulled a pen from her pocket and wrote down the time, the flight number, and one name underlined twice, Tiffany Miller. The plane continued to fill up. The drama was simmering, but the boiling point was yet to come. Tiffany busied herself serving the real passengers, deliberately skipping row 1. Every time she passed Evelyn, she let out a loud, theatrical sigh or rolled her eyes, ensuring the other first-class passengers knew that she knew this woman didn't belong. Finally, boarding was complete. The heavy cabin door was shut and sealed. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged on. This was it. Tiffany marched to the front of the cabin, picking up the passenger manifest tablet. It was time to expose the fraud. She walked up to seat 1A, where Evelyn was quietly looking out the window at the tarmac. Tiffany loomed over her. "Ma'am," she said loudly, ensuring the entire cabin could hear. "I need to see your ID and that ticket again. Now." Evelyn turned slowly. "We've already done this." "We are doing it again," Tiffany smirked. "Because I just checked the manifest, and there is no way a Mrs. Carter bought a full-fare, first-class ticket 2 hours ago with cash. Who are you, really?" The cabin was dead silent. Mr. Henderson in 2A lowered his newspaper. Just then the cockpit door opened. Captain James Sterling stepped out. He was a tall man, silver-haired with the jawline of a movie star, and 4 gold stripes on his shoulder. He needed to use the lavatory before pushback. He frowned, noticing the tension in the cabin, the way Tiffany was looming over a passenger. "Tiffany?" Captain Sterling asked, his deep voice cutting through the tension. Is there a problem back here? Tiffany spun around, her face lighting up with vindictive glee. Yes, Captain. I was just about to call you. We have a stowaway. This woman has a fraudulent ticket and refuses to move to economy. I was just preparing to have her removed. Captain Sterling's eyes moved past Tiffany to the woman sitting in seat 1A. For a second, the captain froze. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. His eyes went wide, and the color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. He recognized the gray cardigan. He recognized the ponytail. Fraudulent, the captain choked out the word. Yes, sir, Tiffany said, oblivious to the captain's panic. Look at her. She obviously doesn't belong here. Captain Sterling pushed past Tiffany, almost knocking her over. He dropped to one knee in the aisle, right next to seat 1A, a position of total submission. Mrs. Carter, the captain said, his voice trembling. My God, I didn't know you were on board. Evelyn looked at the captain, then at the stunned flight attendant. She smiled, but it was a smile that promised a hurricane. Hello, James, Evelyn said calmly. It seems your lead flight attendant thinks I'm stealing a seat. Tiffany's jaw dropped. Her stomach turned to ice. She looked from the captain kneeling like a servant to the woman in the cheap clothes. Who is she? Tiffany thought, panic finally setting in. Who is she? The silence in the first-class cabin was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a crash. Captain James Sterling was still on one knee, his pristine uniform trousers pressing into the carpet. His head bowed slightly as if in prayer. To the passengers watching, wealthy bankers, tech moguls and socialites, this was confusing. To Tiffany Miller, it was a hallucination. Captain! Tiffany's voice was a brittle squeak. What are you doing? She's just a confused passenger. Captain Sterling stood up slowly, his face drained of blood. He turned to Tiffany, and for the first time in their working relationship, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not the stress of a mechanical failure or bad weather, but the primal fear of a man watching his career disintegrate in real time. Tiffany, Sterling said, his voice dangerously low. Be quiet. He turned back to Evelyn, clasping his hands together. Mrs. Carter, I am mortified. I had no idea you were flying with us today. Headquarters didn't send a VIP notice. If I had known, I would have met you at the curb personally. Evelyn adjusted her cardigan, picking a piece of lint off the sleeve. I didn't want a notice sent, James. That defeats the purpose, doesn't it? I wanted to see how my airline is being run when the cameras aren't rolling. My airline? The words hit Tiffany like a physical slap. The room seemed to spin. She grabbed the edge of the bulkhead wall to steady herself. Mrs. Carter, Tiffany whispered, her mind racing frantically, searching her memory banks. But the CEO is Alexander Carter. Evelyn finally looked at Tiffany. The look was withering. Yes, Alexander is my son. And who do you think gave him the money to buy this airline 10 years ago? Who do you think sits as the chairwoman of the board? Who do you think holds the majority controlling interest in Transatlantic Airways? The realization crashed down on Tiffany. This wasn't just a VIP. This was the Carter, the woman whose husband, the late William Carter, had started the company with a single crop duster plane and built an empire. Evelyn Carter wasn't just rich. She was royalty in the aviation world. She was the one who signed off on the union contracts. She was the one who approved the pension plans. And Tiffany had just tried to physically drag her off the plane. I didn't know, Tiffany stammered, her hands trembling. You weren't wearing a diamond medallion tag. You were the clothes? My clothes. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. You judged my worth based on a cardigan I bought at Target. She let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Money talks, Tiffany. Wealth whispers. You'd do well to learn the difference. Captain Sterling stepped in desperate to salvage the situation. Mrs. Carter, please allow me to escort you to the pilot's rest quarters for privacy, or I can have Mr. Henderson here move to a different seat, so you have the entire row to yourself. He looked at Mr. Henderson in 2A. Sir, we would compensate you heavily. No. Evelyn cut him off. She patted the armrest of seat 1A. I paid for this seat. I selected this seat. I am staying in this seat. She turned her gaze back to Tiffany. It was the look of a predator toying with wounded prey. Besides, Evelyn said softly, Tiffany here was just about to show me the world-class service transatlantic is famous for. Weren't you, Tiffany? Tiffany felt like she was going to throw up. Yes, of course, Mrs. Carter. Good, Evelyn said. Then let's not delay the flight any longer. I have a board meeting in London tomorrow morning. I'd hate to be late because the lead flight attendant was confused about the boarding protocol. Right away, Captain Sterling said. He shot Tiffany a look that screamed, "Fix this, or you're dead," then retreated into the cockpit. The door clicked shut. The cabin was still. Every passenger in first class was staring at Tiffany. The businessman in 2A, Mr. Henderson, looked at his own suit and then at Evelyn's sneakers, seemingly re-evaluating his entire life philosophy. Tiffany had to move. She had to work. But her legs felt like lead. She retreated into the galley, pulling the curtain shut with a snap. Sarah, the junior attendant, was standing there, pressing her back against the ovens, eyes wide. Tiffany, was that? Shut up, Tiffany hissed. She grabbed a bottle of water, her hands shaking so hard the cap flew off and rolled under a cart. Just shut up, Sarah. Why didn't you warn me you scanned her ticket? I told you, Sarah whispered back, her voice rising in defense. I told you it scanned green. You told me machines break. You told me to ignore it, Tiffany hyperventilated, gripping the counter. Okay. Think, it's a 7-hour flight. I can fix this. I just need to kill her with kindness. I am the best flight attendant in this fleet. I can turn this around. She's just an old woman. She'll appreciate the service. She smoothed her hair, checked her teeth in the mirror, and forced her face into a rictus of terrifying cheerfulness. She grabbed a hot towel with silver tongs. I can do this, she muttered to herself. She couldn't have been more wrong. Evelyn Carter didn't want a hot towel. She wanted justice. And at 35,000 feet, there was nowhere for Tiffany to hide. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed off as Flight 382 reached cruising altitude over the Atlantic. The ocean below was dark and calm, but inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was radioactive. Tiffany Miller moved through the aisle like a woman walking on a tightrope over a pit of alligators. She had shifted into overdrive. She wasn't just serving, she was performing. She poured champagne with a flourish. She fluffed pillows with geometric precision. She smiled until her facial muscles spasmed. She approached seat 1A. Mrs. Carter, Tiffany said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. May I offer you a glass of our vintage Dom Perignon? Or perhaps a warm mimosa? I also have the dinner menu. I've taken the liberty of reserving the lobster thermidor for you. It's our finest option. Evelyn didn't look up from her book, a paperback mystery novel that looked dog-eared and cheap. Water, she said. Tiffany blinked. Water, of course. Sparkling or still. We have San Pellegrino Voss. Tap, Evelyn said. Tiffany froze. Excuse me. Tap water, Evelyn repeated, finally looking up. From the galley tap, with ice, in a plastic cup. Mrs. Carter, surely I can bring you a bottle of... The passengers in economy get tap water in plastic cups, do they not? Evelyn asked. Well, yes, but you are the owner. I mean, you are in first class. I am a passenger, Evelyn corrected. And I want to see if the water filtration system I approved 3 years ago is being maintained. I read a report that filters on the A350s were being changed late to save money. I want to taste it. Tiffany swallowed hard. Right away. She rushed to the galley. She didn't want to serve the tap water, it was safe, but it was lukewarm and tasted slightly metallic. Serving it to the woman who owned the plane felt like suicide, but disobeying her was worse. She poured the water into a plastic economy cup and brought it out on a silver platter. Her hand shook as she placed it down. Evelyn took a sip. She frowned. She took another sip, swishing it around her mouth like a fine wine. Metallic, Evelyn noted. She pulled out her little notebook and wrote something down. Tiffany watched the pen move, sweat trickling down her back. What is she writing? Is she firing me? Is she writing my obituary? Is everything to your liking? Tiffany asked, her voice trembling. The water is adequate, Evelyn said, but the service is hovering. You're blocking my light, Tiffany. I'm so sorry. Tiffany jumped back. I just wanted to ensure. I know what you want, Evelyn interrupted, closing her notebook. You want to make up for the fact that you treated me like a criminal an hour ago. You want to serve your way out of your prejudice. Evelyn took off her reading glasses. Tell me, Tiffany, if I were actually poor, if I were just a grandmother who saved up for years to buy this ticket to visit her grandchildren, would you be offering me the lobster right now? Or would you still be standing over me, waiting for me to slip up so you could call the air marshal? Tiffany opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The truth was stuck in her throat like a bone. I was just doing my job, Tiffany whispered. Security protocols. Protocol, Evelyn scoffed. Protocol dictates you check a ticket. Protocol does not dictate you humiliate a paying customer because you don't like her shoes. That wasn't protocol, Tiffany. That was malice. Evelyn turned back to the window. Send Sarah over, please. I'd prefer she handle my service for the remainder of the flight. Tiffany felt the tears pricking her eyes. Tears of rage and humiliation. She had been dismissed, benched, replaced by the rookie. She went back to the galley where Sarah was plating salads. She wants you, Tiffany spat out. Go ahead. Go kiss the ring. I hope you enjoy it. Sarah looked at Tiffany, wiping her hands on a towel. For the first time, the timid junior attendant didn't look scared. She looked disappointed. She asked me for a blanket earlier, Sarah said quietly. While you were in the bathroom, she asked me how long I've been working here. She's nice, Tiffany. She's really nice. You just never gave her a chance. Just go, Tiffany snapped. As Sarah walked out to attend to Evelyn, Tiffany slumped against the counter. She pulled out her personal phone, strictly forbidden during service, but she didn't care. She needed to know what she was up against. She logged on to the crew portal using her override code to look up the detailed passenger profile for Evelyn Carter. She scrolled past the frequent flyer status. Invitation only past the meal preferences. She was looking for notes, weaknesses, anything. She found a note from a flight 3 years ago. Passenger. Comment. Crew was excellent. Lead attendant assisted with medication issue. Recommend commendation. She found another. Passenger comment. Coffee was cold. No complaint filed, just a note for improvement. Evelyn wasn't a monster. She was fair. That terrified Tiffany even more. A monster you can fight. A fair judge you simply have to endure. Suddenly, the interphone chimed. 3 distinct high-low tones. Satellite call. Tiffany picked up the handset. Cabin flight attendant Miller. Tiffany, it's Captain Sterling. The pilot's voice was tight, strained. I just got off the sat phone with London operations. Is everything okay? No, Sterling said. It's not. The CEO, Alexander Carter, has been informed that his mother is on board. Apparently she texted him. Tiffany's knuckles turned white. And, the captain continued, he asked for the name of the lead flight attendant. He asked specifically who was working the door during boarding. Tiffany stopped breathing. What did you tell him, Captain? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Captain Sterling was a good man, but he had a mortgage and 2 kids in college. He wasn't going down for Tiffany's ego. I told him the truth, Tiffany. Sterling said, his voice heavy with resignation. I told him it was on you. The line went dead. Tiffany stared at the handset. The hum of the engines sounded like a funeral dirge. She looked out into the cabin. Sarah was laughing softly with Evelyn, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. Evelyn was smiling a genuine warm smile that Tiffany had never received and never would. The flight had 5 hours left. 5 hours in a metal tube with the woman who owned it flying toward a destination where the executioner was waiting at the gate. Tiffany felt a vibration in the floor. Turbulence. But it wasn't the weather. It was her world starting to shake apart. She decided then and there that she wouldn't go down without a fight. If she was going to lose her job, she was going to find a way to make it look like she was the victim. She needed a plan. She looked at the sleeping pill bottle in her purse, her own prescription for layovers. An idea dark and desperate began to form in her mind. If she could fake a medical episode, if she could collapse from stress caused by a disruptive passenger, maybe, just maybe, she could spin the narrative. She popped 2 pills into her hand, her eyes locked on the back of Evelyn Carter's head. Let's see who the victim is, Tiffany whispered. Tiffany Miller was a cornered animal, and cornered animals do not think rationally. They bite. The plan forming in her mind was reckless, fueled by adrenaline and the terrified realization that her career was hours away from ending. She stood in the galley, the hum of the Rolls-Royce engines vibrating against her spine. The 2 sleeping pills were sweating in her palm. Her logic was twisted, warped by years of entitlement. If she couldn't be the hero of this flight, she had to be the victim. If she collapsed, if she claimed that the stress of a hostile passenger caused a medical episode, she could file a union grievance. She could claim Evelyn Carter had been verbally abusive, that the power dynamic was unsafe. It was a Hail Mary pass, but it was all she had. She swallowed the pills dry. She waited 10 minutes until the edges of her vision began to blur, a heavy wool blanket settling over her brain. Perfect. She needed to look disoriented. She grabbed a tray. On it, she placed a single glass of water, Evelyn's requested refill. She walked out of the galley, her steps intentionally unsteady. She wasn't acting now. The medication was hitting her fast. The cabin was dimmed for the mid-flight rest. Most passengers were asleep. Mr. Henderson in 2A was snoring softly. Evelyn Carter was awake reading her book, the overhead reading light casting a halo around her grey hair. Tiffany approached. She needed a witness. She looked for Sarah, who was organizing the duty-free cart a few rows back. Good. Sarah is watching. Mrs. Carter. Tiffany slurred slightly, leaning heavily against the side of the pod. Your water. Evelyn looked up, marking her page. She scrutinized Tiffany's face. She saw the dilated pupils, the sheen of cold sweat. Are you all right, dear? Evelyn asked. It wasn't sarcastic. It was the genuine concern of a mother, even for a woman she disliked. This was Tiffany's cue. Don't speak to me like that, Tiffany gasped, loud enough for Sarah to hear. She let her knees buckle. She tipped the tray, sending the plastic cup and ice cubes cascading onto Evelyn's lap. Oh! Evelyn recoiled as the ice water hit her slacks. Tiffany threw herself backward, collapsing into the aisle with a heavy thud. She sprawled out on the carpet, throwing an arm over her eyes. She pushed me! Tiffany shrieked, her voice cracking. She pushed me, I can't. The stress, my heart. The cabin erupted. Mr. Henderson woke up with a snort. Sarah dropped a stack of magazines and ran forward. Tiffany! Sarah cried, dropping to her knees beside her lead attendant. She attacked me. Tiffany sobbed, the tears real now, induced by the chemical haze and panic. I tried to serve her. She's so abusive, I think I'm having a panic attack. Or a stroke. Evelyn Carter stood up. She brushed the ice off her lap. She didn't look frantic. She looked down at the woman writhing on the floor, with the clinical detachment of a judge viewing evidence. Stay back! Tiffany screamed as Evelyn stepped into the aisle. Don't let her near me! Captain Sterling burst out of the cockpit. His cap, missing his tie, loosened. What is going on back here? Captain! Sarah yelled, checking Tiffany's pulse. Tiffany collapsed. She says the passenger in 1A pushed her. Captain Sterling looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at the captain. James, Evelyn said calmly. I did not touch her. She poured water on me and threw herself on the floor. I believe she is intoxicated. Liar! Tiffany wailed from the floor, clutching her chest. Check the cameras. Oh God, I'm dizzy. Is there a doctor on board? Captain Sterling shouted to the cabin at large. A man in row 3, a cardiologist named Dr. Aris, unbuckled his belt and rushed forward. I'm a doctor. He knelt beside Tiffany, pushing Sarah aside. He grabbed Tiffany's wrist. He shone a penlight into her eyes. Tiffany tried to squeeze them shut, but the doctor was faster. Pupils are sluggish, Dr. Aris announced. Pulse is slow, not fast. Respiration is depressed. He looked up at the captain. This isn't a panic attack. This looks like sedation. Tiffany's heart hammered ironically, the only part of her body fighting the sedation. No, he's supposed to say it's stress. Sedation. Captain Sterling frowned. Dr. Aris sniffed Tiffany's breath. No alcohol. Has she taken anything medication? No. Tiffany moaned. Just stress. Evelyn Carter stepped forward. She pointed a manicured finger at the pocket of Tiffany's apron. The bulge of the prescription bottle was visible. Check her pockets, doctor, Evelyn commanded. You can't search me. Tiffany tried to bat their hands away, but her limbs felt like wet noodles. Dr. Aris reached into the apron and pulled out the orange bottle. He read the label. Zolpidem, 10 milligauss. He rattled the bottle. It was nearly empty. She's dosed herself, Dr. Aris said, standing up. She's not a victim of assault, Captain. She's unfit for duty. She's high on sleeping pills. The silence that followed was absolute. The accusation of assault hung in the air, rapidly dissolving under the weight of the evidence. Tiffany lay on the floor, the drugs pulling her under, realizing with a final flicker of consciousness that she hadn't framed Evelyn. She had just committed the cardinal sin of aviation, incapacitating herself while responsible for the safety of the aircraft. Get her up, Captain Sterling said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. Sarah, Dr. Aris, help me move her to the crew rest bunk. Confiscate her badge. She is relieved of command immediately. But she pushed me. Tiffany mumbled her words, slurring into nonsense. Save it for the inquiry, Tiffany, Sterling said. As they dragged Tiffany past row 1, her feet dragging on the carpet, she looked up. Evelyn Carter was standing there blotting her wet trousers with a napkin. Evelyn didn't look angry. She looked at Tiffany with profound pity. You poor, foolish girl, Evelyn whispered. And then the darkness took Tiffany. The descent into London Heathrow was smooth, but inside the cabin of Flight 382, the mood was funereal. Sarah, the junior attendant, had been promoted to lead by default. She was pale and shaking as she performed the pre-landing checks, terrified that she might have missed a crumb on the carpet and angered the matriarch in 1A. But Evelyn Carter was the model passenger. She had tidied her own pod. She had thanked Sarah for the meal. She sat looking out the window as the grey sprawl of London rose up to meet them. Tiffany Miller was strapped into the jump seat in the rear galley, groggy, dishevelled, and conscious enough to know her life was over. The drugs had worn off enough to leave her with a splitting headache and a crushing sense of doom. She had been stripped of her scarf. Her blazer was folded on a bin. She looked small. The wheels touched down with a screech of rubber on tarmac. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. Usually this was the moment Tiffany loved the announcement, "Welcome to London." The feeling of a job well done. Today it sounded like a prison door slamming shut. The plane taxied to the gate, but it didn't go to the usual terminal gate. It taxied to a remote stand far away from the prying eyes of the public terminal. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Sterling's voice crackled over the PA. We have arrived in London. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have a security protocol to clear before disembarkation. A murmur went through the cabin. Passengers craned their necks. Through the window, Tiffany saw them. 3 black SUVs were parked on the tarmac. A set of mobile stairs was being driven up to the front door, L1, the door Tiffany usually guarded. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, flanked by 2 large men in suits, was a man Tiffany recognized from the cover of Forbes magazine. Alexander Carter, the CEO, Evelyn's son. He wasn't smiling. He checked his watch, tapping his foot impatiently. The wind whipped his tie around, but he stood like a statue. The cabin door opened. The cool, damp London air rushed in. Sarah stood by the door, terrified. She looked at the captain. Do I let them in? Stand aside, Sarah, Captain Sterling said. Alexander Carter walked up the stairs. He didn't look at the crew. He didn't look at the cockpit. He walked straight into the first-class cabin. The passengers held their breath. Mother, Alexander said. His voice was deep, commanding, yet laced with relief. Evelyn stood up. She looked tired. Hello, Alex. You didn't have to come out to the tarmac. I did, he said, taking her hand and kissing her cheek. When the captain messaged me that a crew member had falsely accused you of assault and staged a medical emergency, I thought it best to handle the extraction personally. He looked around the cabin, apologizing to the other passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Transatlantic Airways apologizes for the disruption caused by our crew member today. You will all be receiving a full refund for this flight and a voucher for future travel. A collective gasp of appreciation went through first class. Mr. Henderson looked like he might cry with joy. Now, Alexander said, his voice hardening. Where is she? Captain Sterling stepped out of the cockpit. She is in the rear galley, sir, restrained for safety. Bring her, Alexander ordered. Sarah and another flight attendant walked Tiffany up the long aisle from the back of the plane. It was the longest walk of Tiffany's life. Every passenger stared at her. The riffraff, in economy, craned their necks to see the woman who had caused the delay. The elite in first class looked at her with disgust. She reached the front. She stood before Evelyn and Alexander Carter. She tried to stand tall to muster some of her old arrogance, but she just looked like a mess. Her hair was coming loose. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Mr. Carter," Tiffany began, her voice trembling, "I want to explain. There was a misunderstanding. Your mother, she refused to follow instructions and—" Alexander held up a hand. Silence. "Ms. Miller," Alexander said, "I have just listened to the cockpit voice recorder audio that was live-streamed to our operations center during the incident. We heard everything. We heard you humiliate my mother at the gate. We heard you threaten her. And we heard you admit to the doctor that you took Z drugs while on duty." Tiffany blanched. I have a prescription. "Not for use during flight operations," Alexander snapped. "You endangered 300 lives because your ego couldn't handle a woman in a cardigan sitting in first class." He turned to his mother. "Mom, do you want to press charges for the false accusation of assault? The London Metropolitan Police are at the bottom of the stairs." Tiffany's knees gave way. "Police, no please, I've worked here for 12 years. I'm the lead." Evelyn looked at Tiffany. The silence stretched for an eternity. "No police, Alex," Evelyn said softly. Tiffany let out a sob of relief. "Thank you. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Carter. I promise I'll be better. I'm not doing it for you." Evelyn interrupted, her voice steel. "I'm doing it because I don't want to waste another second of my life thinking about you. But you will never wear that uniform again. You will never set foot on a transatlantic plane again. Not as a crew member, not as a passenger." Evelyn reached into her tote bag, the worn canvas bag. Tiffany had mocked and pulled out the plastic cup Tiffany had served her. She placed it in Tiffany's shaking hand. "Take this as a souvenir," Evelyn said. "It's a reminder that it doesn't matter what the vessel looks like on the outside. It's what's inside that counts. And frankly, my dear, you are empty." "Escort her off the property," Alexander ordered the security guards. "Confiscate her passport and turn it over to immigration. She can find her own way home." 2 large security officers stepped onto the plane. They didn't handle her gently. They grabbed Tiffany by the arms and marched her out of the aircraft door. As she was dragged down the stairs, the cool wind hitting her face, Tiffany looked back up. Through the window of seat 1A, she saw Evelyn Carter sitting back down, accepting a glass of champagne from Sarah. Evelyn didn't look out the window. She had already moved on. Tiffany was left standing on the tarmac, surrounded by the roar of jet engines, holding a plastic cup of lukewarm tap water, while the black SUVs drove the Carters away to their private lounge. She was alone, and for the first time in her life, she realized that she was the one who belonged in the back of the line. The walk of shame didn't end on the tarmac at Heathrow. For Tiffany Miller, the nightmare was only just beginning to buffer. After being unceremoniously escorted off the Transatlantic Airways property, Tiffany found herself standing on the curb of the arrivals hall, with nothing but her purse and the clothes on her back. Her luggage, her immaculate roller bag, with her change of clothes and toiletries, had been seized by the airline as company property, pending an investigation into the Z drugs found in her apron. She was stranded in London. She had no return ticket. She had no crew hotel voucher. And worst of all, her company credit card was already declined when she tried to buy a coffee at Costa. She had to max out her personal emergency credit card to buy a last-minute one-way ticket back to New York. It wasn't on transatlantic. It was on a budget carrier in the absolute last row of the plane right next to the lavatory. The seat didn't recline. The passenger next to her was eating a tuna sandwich that smelled like low tide. For 7 hours, Tiffany sat in the cramped middle seat, her knees pressed against the plastic tray table, unable to sleep, unable to escape the looping horror of the last 12 hours. But the real crash happened when she landed at JFK and finally turned her phone back on. Ding, 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 ding. Her phone vibrated so violently it nearly flew out of her hand. Text messages, missed calls, Instagram tags, Twitter, notifications. It was a digital avalanche. She opened a text from her sister, Tiffany. "Oh my God. Tell me this isn't real. It's everywhere." Attached was a link to a TikTok video. Tiffany's stomach dropped as she clicked it. The video had been filmed by Mr. Henderson, the businessman, in seat 2A. He had recorded everything. The angle was perfect. The caption read, #Flight attendant from hell fakes seizure to frame elderly billionaire. Karma is swift. The video showed it all. It showed Tiffany's slur, the way she deliberately tipped the tray of ice water onto Evelyn Carter, her theatrical flop onto the floor, and her screaming accusations. Then the kicker, the camera zoomed in on Evelyn Carter, standing calmly pointing out the pill bottle, followed by the captain stripping Tiffany of her duties. The video had 14.5 million views. The comments were a cesspool of vitriol. Imagine being this entitled. She poured water on an old lady. That lady is Evelyn Carter. She owns the airline. This flight attendant has a death wish. Not us all. I know her. That's Tiffany Miller. She was rude to me on a flight to Miami last year. Glad she finally got caught. The way she flopped on the floor. Give her an Oscar for Best Clown. Tiffany stood in the baggage claim area, hyperventilating. People were walking past her, looking at their phones. A group of teenagers walked by, glanced at her, then looked at a phone screen, then looked back at her. They started whispering and pointing. One of them raised a phone to film her. She pulled her coat collar up and ran. The next 48 hours were a blur of bureaucratic execution. She was summoned to the Transatlantic Airways headquarters in Queens. She didn't even make it past the lobby security. A human resources representative met her at the turnstiles with a cardboard box and a thick envelope. "Tiffany Miller," the rep said, her voice devoid of any sympathy. "You are hereby terminated for cause. Gross misconduct, endangerment of passengers, substance abuse while on duty, and falsifying a report against a customer." "I want to speak to the union rep," Tiffany demanded, her voice shrill. "The union has already reviewed the footage and the toxicology report from London," the rep said, handing her the envelope. "They have declined to represent you. You're on your own." "What about my pension, my severance?" "You were fired for cause, Miss Miller. You get nothing. In fact, the legal department is currently calculating the cost of the fuel diversion and the refunds issued to the first-class cabin. You may be hearing from our lawyers regarding restitution." Tiffany walked out into the rain, clutching the box. It contained a stapler, a photo of her cat, and a coffee mug that said, "Queen of the Sky." She went home to her apartment, a chic, overpriced studio in Long Island City that she could barely afford even with her salary. She sat on her velvet sofa and applied for unemployment online. Denied. Reason termination for misconduct. She applied to Delta. Rejection email in 10 minutes. She applied to American. Rejection. She applied to JetBlue. Rejection. She had been blacklisted. In the aviation world, the do not hire list is invisible, but impenetrable. Her name was radioactive. 2 weeks later, the eviction notice was taped to her door. She tried to sell her designer clothes on Poshmark to make rent, but the internet trolls found her account. They flooded her listings with fake bids and harassed her in the comments until the platform banned her for generating negative community engagement. The final blow came a month later. Tiffany was walking down the street wearing sweatpants, her hair messy, trying to buy groceries with food stamps. She passed a newsstand. On the cover of Aviation Weekly was a picture of Evelyn Carter, looking regal and kind. The headline read, "The Carter Standard: How Transatlantic's Matriarch is Revolutionizing Passenger Respect." Tiffany looked at the magazine, then at her own reflection in the shop window. The glamorous, powerful flight attendant was gone. Staring back was a tired, broke woman who had mistaken a uniform for a personality. 8 months later. The diner was located off exit 14 on the New Jersey Turnpike. It was the kind of place where the linoleum was peeling, the coffee was burnt, and the customers were always in a bad mood. "Hey, honey, I've been waiting for my refill for 10 minutes. Tiffany Miller flinched. She adjusted her apron, a stained polyester thing that smelled like grease and ketchup. "I'm coming, sir. Just a moment." "Don't just a moment me," the truck driver grunted, slamming his hand on the table. "I have a schedule to keep. Chop, chop." Tiffany hurried over with the coffee pot. Her feet were throbbing. She was wearing cheap sneakers from Walmart, the kind she used to make fun of passengers for wearing. She had developed a bunion on her left foot, and she couldn't afford to see a podiatrist because this job didn't offer health insurance until she survived a year. She poured the coffee. Her hand shook slightly, a remnant of the anxiety that now plagued her daily. A few drops splashed onto the saucer. "Watch it," the driver snapped. "You're clumsy. You know that." "I'm sorry," Tiffany whispered, wiping the saucer with a rag. "I'm really sorry." Yeah. Just bring me the check." Tiffany walked back to the counter to tally the bill. She looked around the diner. This was her life now. Double shifts, minimum wage, and tips that barely covered her rent in a basement apartment in Newark. She had sold her car. She had sold her jewelry. Her friends from the airline had blocked her number months ago. She was invisible. Just another waitress in a roadside diner. Above the counter, a small TV was playing the midday news. Tiffany usually tuned it out, but the familiar chime of the breaking news intro caught her ear. And finally today, the news anchor said, "A heart-warming story from Transatlantic Airways." Tiffany froze. She looked up at the screen. There was Evelyn Carter. She was standing at a podium at JFK Airport, flanked by Captain Sterling, and Tiffany's heart skipped a beat. Sarah. Sarah was wearing the lead flight attendant scarf. She looked radiant, confident, and professional. "Today," Evelyn spoke into the microphone, her voice as calm and melodic as Tiffany remembered, "we are launching the Evelyn Carter Opportunity Scholarship. We are selecting 50 young women from underprivileged backgrounds and paying for their full pilot and flight crew training. We want to ensure that the future of aviation is defined not by where you come from or what you wear, but by your character and your drive." The camera panned to the first recipient of the scholarship, a young black girl, maybe 18, dressed in a simple grey cardigan. She was crying tears of joy. Evelyn hugged the girl. It was a genuine motherly hug. "We believe," Evelyn continued, looking straight into the camera, "that everyone deserves a seat at the table, or in this case, a seat in the sky." Tiffany stared at the screen. Tears welled up in her eyes, hot and stinging. She remembered the look on Evelyn's face when she had blocked her from boarding. The arrogance, the cruelty. She realized now that she hadn't just lost a job. She had lost her humanity. She had had the world at her fingertips, a career respect, a good salary, and she had thrown it all away because she wanted to feel superior to a stranger for 5 minutes. "Hey, waitress!" The shout from table 4 snapped her back to reality. "I need ketchup!" Tiffany wiped her eyes with the back of her greasy hand. She didn't look at the TV again. She couldn't bear it. "Coming," she said, her voice cracking. She grabbed a bottle of ketchup. As she walked across the dirty floor, she caught a glimpse of a young woman entering the diner. She was dressed sharply, pulling a roller bag, wearing a flight attendant uniform from a regional airline. She looked tired, but proud. Tiffany stopped. The young flight attendant looked at Tiffany at her stained apron, her messy hair, her broken posture. "Excuse me," the young woman asked politely. "Do you have a table near an outlet? I need to charge my iPad." Tiffany looked at the girl. She saw herself from 15 years ago. "Sure," Tiffany said softly. "Right this way, miss. Sit wherever you like." She led the girl to the best booth, the one by the window. She wiped the table down with extra care. "Can I get you anything to start?" Tiffany asked. "Coffee, water." "Water would be great," the flight attendant said. "No ice, please." "Of course," Tiffany said. "Right away." Tiffany walked to the back. She filled a glass with water. She checked it to make sure it was clean. She placed it gently on a tray. She wasn't the queen of the sky anymore. She never really was. She was just Tiffany. And for the first time in a long time, she served the water with a little bit of humility, knowing that the distance between the first-class suite and the diner booth was shorter than anyone thinks, and the fall is always harder when you think you're above everyone else. That is the story of Tiffany Miller and Evelyn Carter. It's a brutal reminder that in the service industry and in life, you never truly know who you are dealing with. Tiffany judged a book by its cover, and that book ended up being the manual on how to fire her. The tragedy isn't just that she lost her job, it's that she lost it for nothing. She lost it for ego. She lost it for a fleeting sense of superiority that crumbled the moment real power walked into the room. It teaches us that true class isn't about the price of your ticket or the label on your clothes. It's about how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. I hope this story sent a chill down your spine. If you enjoyed this heavy dose of Karen karma, please destroy that. Like button, it really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Sarah and saw your boss lying? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, so you never miss a story about justice being served at 30,000 feet. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.